I'm Bragi Gudbrandsson. I'm born here in Reykjavik. And I started to work as a director of local social services, which I did for 10 years. In 1991, I was appointed counsellor to the Minister of Social Affairs. And I worked there in preparing the establishment of the Government's Agency for Child Protection, which became operational in 1995. And I was appointed its general director. I was in that position until 2019, when I was elected member of the Committee on the Rights of the Child.
What was your inspiration for setting up Barnahus, and how was it established here in Iceland?
Well, I knew from the time I was director of local social services that child sexual abuse was an issue which was not in a very good shape in Iceland, to say the least. The society was in total denial of the very existence of child sexual abuse, and there was no procedures existent in terms of how you would respond to cases of child sexual abuse. So this was one of the categories of reforms that I felt was absolutely necessary to accomplish. The problem with Iceland was that we did not have a proper infrastructure in child protection. We had almost 200 local authorities, and each local authority had child protection committee. So most of the child protection units in Iceland did not have even trained social workers or any professionals working for them. So it was kind of a self-evident to try to make a progress by setting up a competence centers that would serve the whole country. So that's how the idea came. And I started to call it Barnahus.
On which basic principles is the Barnahus based?
We were trying to balance two principles. On the one hand, the human rights principle of the fair trial, or the presumption of innocence. And on the other, the principle of the best interest of the child. So this was an attempt to balance these two human rights principles, to work out an environment which would be a kind of a synthesis of these two basic principles. That came about by having this arrangement whereby the child would be able to give his or her story in the presence of all these different professions, including the defense, who then had the opportunity to ask the child witness questions on behalf of the accused person.
In what way has the Barnahus developed throughout Europe?
One of the reasons why Barnahus has grown so rapidly, and now you can find Barnahus in over 20 countries, either in full operation or being prepared to be operated, is this, that it really demonstrates the way in which you can respond to child abuse and child sexual abuse in particular by collaboration, by multi-agency approach and putting the child in the front. I would first like to say that Barnahus sort of reflects the two of the basic principles of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Or on the one hand, the best interest principle, and the other principle, the right of the child to be heard.
Why do you think the Barnahus is in the best interests of children?
The child has this right to be heard within the judicial system, within the medical system, within the social system. And if you didn't have these sectors operating together, then the child obviously would need to go to all these different agencies and be subjected to repetitive interviews. So it's quite clear that this is the only way in which you can actually implement the convention properly, is to do it this way. Now, that means that the child's disclosure is absolutely crucial, and it has to be elucidated in a coherent and professionally sound manner to enhance the evidential validity of the child's disclosure. So that's one of the aspects. So it's a question of not only the best interest of the child, but also the best interest of the investigation. And I often say that Barnahus is not a recipe for the cookshop of the future. It rather contains the ingredients to create a process in which you make sure to maximize the efficiency of the criminal investigation, but at the same time you preserve the child's integrity and the child's rights according to the convention. And now, very important as well, this has been reflected now in the international conventions and guidelines of the Council of Europe, both the guidelines on child-friendly justice, the Lanzarote Convention, the EU directives on the rights of child victims and witnesses. You will find this as well in the jurisprudence of the Committee on the Rights of the Child that has recommended Barnahus or the child-friendly multi-agency response to child sexual abuse and child abuse generally in the concluding recommendation of the Committee on the Rights of the Child with regard to the state reviews of multiple states all over the world. So I believe that these are now standards that are internationally accepted, at least in Europe, and certainly we are on the way with regard to the world as a whole. So this is a process. It's a slow process. So one has to be patient. And I think there is, having different professionals learning to work together, appreciating each other. That takes time because everyone is, in a sense, in a little box, and they feel that they are responsible for their little, box. And so it's once the different professions start to work together, they really start to appreciate each other. They become friends. They share information and so on. Let's face it, there is no profession that has the total picture. And if we want to have a comprehensive approach, and if we want to meet the child in all its entirety, with its complex, different needs and so on, we need multiple professionals, and they need to work together. Collectively, they can produce the outcome that the child needs, but we can't do it on our own. The child's voice needs to be listened to very carefully, because that's where you have the evidence, that's where you have the foundation on which your intervention needs to be based on. And if you don't have the space, the safe space for the child, and if you don't give the child the support by a child expert to disclose the abuse, then you are most probably not going to be able to identify what really has happened. And that's why this child-sensitive approach is so important. The issue of child abuse, child sexual abuse, and violence against children generally is an issue that the state must be responsible for. Now, we have almost all states in the world that have signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that includes a commitment in protecting children from violence in all its forms. That means that the public institutions, they must take on the responsibility of protecting children by intervening and by providing the necessary services to heal the child, if you like. Now, this means that you will have to engage all these public agencies into this work. And if you don't do that, you don't have access to all the different compartments, if you like, in the process. All these professions, the medical professions, the prosecution, the judiciary, and not to speak of the child protection, they are all bound with confidentiality rules, the professional secrecy rules. So NGOs, they wouldn't be able to operate Barnahus because the information, the data that all these different sectors need to have access to and to share, they wouldn't be available. So in the first place, it wouldn't be possible to have a full operation of Barnahus by NGOs or private partners. And secondly, the sustainability, that's an issue with regard to finance. And I've seen that happening as well, that if the state does not take on the responsibility of financing and ensuring the services, then you don't have the sustainability that you need. It takes a long time to build up an efficient Barnahus. It doesn't happen overnight, and it needs to be developed through time, which means that you need to have the resources, long-term resources, and you need to be able to train people, all the different professions. They may be excellent professions, in their own professions, but they also have to learn from the other professions, and this takes time to develop. So it's absolutely crucial that the state assumes this responsibility, or the regional authorities or local authorities, they can do it as well. It has to be public commitment to work on this. So this is so important, it cannot be overemphasized.
What kind of recommendation would you have for the Netherlands?
I'm fond of many things that have been set up in the Netherlands. What I would be concerned about, however, is that I feel it's perhaps a bit more network-orientated rather than service-orientated. So I would have thought that by bringing these different professionals from these different agencies together under one roof, working together, collaborating together, creating a safe space, child-friendly space for children to be interviewed, I would have thought that this would probably be more sort of in line with the child-friendliness that I would see, because for example, MTA system, which is, well, in some way it is child-orientated, but still it's a family kind of approach. It's not necessarily a child-friendly approach. So I would recommend that you would try out some variations, and I think it certainly would be worthwhile for Netherlands to do a pilot, on a couple of places or so for a start, to see how it works, whether it wouldn't deepen the child-centeredness of your system. I'm sure that it would be an interesting outcome in that.
So reflecting on how many Barnahuses there are now here in Europe, would you say this is your legacy?
Well, this has been my mission, professional mission, for now over 20 years. Barnahus will be 25 next year. And I have been from the very start absolutely convinced that the Barnahus approach is the best way to approach the issue of not only child sexual abuse, but child abuse more generally, and various other issues in relation to children, like, for example, migrant children and children that we need to listen to in order to make our decisions in line with the best interests of the child. Because it's based all on evidence-based knowledge and practices that we want to preserve. I could never have envisaged when I started that this would grow into such a big thing like it has. But I am relentlessly working on it still, and I will be until I drop dead, I think.